Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be tackling Maps of Meaning by Jordan B. Peterson.
Oh, cool.
We've got a lot of great excerpts, figures from the book itself, and we're going to try to make sense of it all. I think you're really going to want to grab a notepad for this one.
It's a dense book.
It is really dense.
There's a lot going on.
So we're going to explore how these ancient myths act like psychological maps for us.
Right.
And we're going to see if they can help us navigate the chaos of the modern world.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
So Peterson really blends mythology and psychology to try to understand the human experience, and he argues that our brains are wired to seek meaning. It's not just some kind of philosophical idea.
Yeah.
It's like literally how we're built.
So, okay, let's unpack this maps of meaning concept a bit.
Okay.
He says they shape our understanding of the world.
I think a good way to think about it is like if you imagine yourself being dropped in a new city with no map.
Oh, yeah.
You'd be lost anxious, right? You wouldn't know what to do. So these maps of meaning give us a way to make sense of the world. They give us direction and a sense of purpose, and they're shaped by our experiences, our culture, and our biology.
Peterson even shares that chilling anecdote about visiting a prison and trying to understand, like, the mindset of people who commit horrific acts.
Right.
And he found it disturbingly easy to imagine himself, like, doing those things.
Yeah, on page 9, he talks about how pivotal that experience was for him. It really made him realize that that capacity for evil is not just a theoretical thing, it's within all of us.
Yeah.
And that facing that shadow self is key to personal growth.
It's a little scary, but also really makes you think. So how do these maps of meaning actually work?
Well, Peterson argues that myths aren't just ancient stories. There are these psychological maps that have been passed down for generations because they speak to something fundamental about being human. On page 24, he actually calls them maps of the known.
It's almost like a window into the collective unconscious. It reminds me of Carl Jung's work.
Oh, that's a great connection. A really good example of this is the Sumerian creation myth, the story of Enki and Enlil.
Okay.
Peterson uses this on pages 93 and 94 to illustrate how myths often represent the separation of chaos and order.
Yeah, and that's such a recurring theme, right?
Right.
Heroes battling monsters, gods bringing order to the world.
Right.
You see it everywhere.
Exactly. And Peterson argues that these myths aren't just symbolic, they reflect our own psychological process of making sense of the world.
Okay, so how can we use these mythological maps to navigate our own lives? Do they give us concrete guidance?
Well, Peterson argues that myths introduce us to archetypes.
Okay.
These are universal patterns of behavior and imagery that appear across cultures.
Okay.
They're not just literary devices.
Right.
They represent fundamental aspects of the human psyche.
Like the hero, the villain, the wise old man, these classic figures we see.
Exactly. Like take the hero's journey.
Right.
It's not just a fun adventure story.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor for confronting challenges, overcoming obstacles, and achieving personal growth.
So it's like a blueprint for how to live a meaningful life.
In a sense, yes. They give us a framework for understanding our challenges and the potential for growth within those challenges. By recognizing these archetypal patterns in our own lives,
Yeah.
we gain a deeper self-understanding.
This is starting to click for me a little bit. But what about that unsettling idea of the capacity for evil?
Yeah.
Peterson's prison visit really emphasized that for me.
It is unsettling, but it's important to remember that he's not saying that we're all doomed to become monsters.
Okay.
It's about self-awareness and responsibility. On page 109, he introduces this archetype of the hostile twin
Okay.
to represent this inner struggle.
So we all have this hostile twin within us.
He uses the example of Seth, the jealous brother of Osiris,
Yeah.
to illustrate this. It's a reminder that even within ourselves, there can be this destructive force that opposes growth and order. And he's very clear that confronting this shadow self is necessary for growth, as he writes on page 337.
Yeah. So how do we even begin to grapple with that hostile twin?
I think the first step is acknowledging its existence. We need to become aware of our shadow tendencies,
Okay.
our jealousy, resentment, cruelty, things like that,
Yeah.
so that we can choose to act differently.
Sounds like a lifelong process.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the hero's journey again, facing those inner demons to ultimately become a better version of ourselves.
That's a powerful connection. It's not about achieving moral purity,
Right.
but striving to become more conscious and aligned with our values.
This is incredible. We've covered so much ground already, but I feel like we're just getting started. What stands out to you most from exploring maps of meaning so far?
What I find most remarkable is Peterson's emphasis on voluntary exploration.
Okay.
He doesn't offer dogma. He challenges us to become explorers of our own inner landscapes.
He's big on the importance of knowledge, too, right?
Yeah.
Not just like facts, but understanding how to actually live.
Right. He actually differentiates between knowing how and knowing what on pages 69 and 70.
Okay.
We need both procedural knowledge, which is the ability to do things, and declarative knowledge, which is the ability to explain things.
Makes sense.
Both are crucial for navigating life.
It's like learning to ride a bike. You can't just read about it.
Right.
You have to get on and practice. But he's also critical of a purely scientific approach, isn't he?
Yes. He critiques the limitations of strict empirical methodology on pages 214 and 215.
Gotcha.
He acknowledges science,
Right.
but argues that we can't reduce human beings to just data points.
Yeah.
The subjective experience is equally important.
There's more to life than just facts and figures.
Exactly. Meaning and value are often found in our emotions, our relationships, our sense of purpose. It's about becoming wise, not just knowledgeable.
And that brings us to the tension between belonging and individuality.
Right.
We all want to fit in,
Yeah.
but also be true to ourselves.
Yeah.
How do we find that balance?
Well, Peterson tackles this on pages 188 and 189. He argues that belonging to a group is essential for security and learning, but that groups can also become tyrannical.
So how do we avoid that?
He uses the hero's journey analogy, again, specifically on pages 183 and 251,
Okay.
and says that true individuality emerges from a disciplined apprenticeship within a group.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between respecting tradition and forging your own path.
Precisely.
Oh.
And he even warns against blind obedience on page 225, emphasizing the importance of questioning established norms.
That's good advice.
Yeah. This reminds me of another key idea in Maps of Meaning,
Okay.
transformation. He dives into alchemy, which is pretty unexpected.
Alchemy. That's fascinating. What's the connection?
Well, the alchemists, as he describes them in chapter 3, were obsessed with transformation, not just of matter, but also of the self.
Interesting.
They sought a higher state of being.
Like turning lead into gold, but for the soul.
What a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Peterson sees this as a powerful metaphor for our own lives. By confronting our own flaws, our own base metals, so to speak,
Right.
we can strive to become more golden in a sense. It's a quest for self-knowledge and self-improvement.
Okay, so we've got confronting our shadow selves, navigating this tension between individuality and the group, and this alchemical process of transformation. It's a lot to take in, but I'm hooked.
You too.
We've only just scratched the surface here.
Yeah, there's so much more to discuss.
It's getting late, so we'll pause here.
Okay.
But we'll delve deeper into Peterson's Maps of Meaning in part 2 of our deep dive. Trust me, you won't want to miss it.
I'll be here.
All right, see you then.
Sounds good.
Picking up where we left off, you mentioned alchemy.
Yeah.
It's such a fascinating lens for understanding this idea of transformation.
Yeah.
The alchemists weren't just trying to, turn lead into gold.
Right.
Their quest was about achieving a higher state of being.
And I remember Peterson contrasts the alchemist's journey with what he calls the normal story in that diagram on pages 328 and 329. What's the difference?
Yeah. So the normal story represents those predictable patterns of life.
Right.
Whereas the revolutionary story, which is what the alchemists pursued, involves descending into chaos, dismantling the old structures to make way for something new. I've definitely had times in my own life where everything felt like it was falling apart.
Yeah.
But looking back, those were periods of huge growth and change for me.
That's exactly the point. That process of descent and emergence is like a fundamental pattern in human experience. Think about how many myths involve the hero facing death or descending into the underworld before being reborn.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You also mentioned this idea of redeeming matter.
Right.
What do the alchemists mean by that?
Well, they believed that the physical world was inherently flawed or corrupted, and their goal was to purify and perfect it.
Okay.
To transform it into something more divine. It was a deeply spiritual pursuit.
So they didn't see a separation between the material and the spiritual.
Right.
It sounds like inner and outer transformation were intertwined for them.
Exactly. And Peterson sees that as a powerful metaphor for our own lives. By confronting our own flaws, our own base metals, so to speak, we can strive to become more whole, more golden in a sense. It's a quest for self-knowledge and self-improvement.
We're all on that quest in a way.
Right.
Trying to make sense of the world, find our place, create a meaningful life. It reminds me of that image. Peterson uses the devouring wolf. What was that again?
Oh, yeah. He describes it on page 336. It's the symbol of the shadow self.
Right.
Those aspects of ourselves that we fear and try to hide, but facing them is how we achieve true transformation.
It's like a psychological form of alchemy. breaking ourselves down to rebuild something stronger.
That's a fantastic way to put it. The devouring wolf represents that necessary destructive force.
Yeah.
It's like a fire that burns away impurities, leaving behind something more refined.
Powerful image, but definitely not a comfortable one.
No.
Confronting our shadows sounds pretty terrifying.
It can be. It means acknowledging things we'd rather not see.
Right.
Our capacity for selfishness, cruelty, even evil.
It makes you think about Peterson's point that we can all too easily imagine ourselves doing terrible things.
It's a sobering thought. But he's not saying that we're all destined to be bad. It's about awareness. On page 337, he writes that confronting this capacity for darkness allows us to choose to act differently.
Okay, so we've got confronting the unknown, facing our shadow selves, engaging in this alchemical process of transformation.
Right.
It's a lot to process. I'm curious to hear more about the roles of faith and hope in all of this.
Yeah, this is where Peterson's thinking gets really interesting. He argues that faith isn't just about believing in a dogma or a set of rules.
Okay.
It's about choosing to act despite uncertainty, trusting that meaning and purpose can emerge even when we don't have all the answers.
Sounds like a kind of existential courage.
Yeah.
Taking a leap of faith without knowing the outcome.
Exactly. It's the willingness to embrace the unknown risk failure and keep going even when we're unsure where we're headed. And that's where hope comes, in the belief that things can get better, that even in darkness there's potential for redemption and growth.
But isn't that a bit naive? The world can be a pretty brutal place.
It absolutely can be.
Yeah.
But Peterson isn't suggesting that we ignore suffering or evil. He's saying that we have a choice in how we respond. We can be consumed by despair.
Right.
Or choose hope, choose action, choose to fight for a better future.
It's a powerful message. But I'm wondering, where does that hope come from? What fuels that belief in a better future when things are so tough?
For Peterson, it comes from recognizing that humans are capable of incredible things.
Right.
Love, compassion, creativity, immense courage, and self-sacrifice.
He uses examples like Solzhenitsyn, who resisted the Soviet regime. It's inspiring to see how individuals have chosen hope and action, even in the darkest circumstances.
Exactly. And it's not just in history, it's in myths, too. Think of the hero who confronts the dragon of chaos, or the shaman who descends into the underworld to bring back knowledge and healing.
It's like those stories remind us of the potential for greatness that's inside each of us. But it's not enough to just understand these maps of meaning.
Right.
We have to actually live by them, right?
You got it. It's about taking these insights from mythology, psychology, and our own experiences, and using them to create a life that's not just successful, but meaningful, fulfilling, and aligned with our deepest values.
And Peterson doesn't shy away from the spiritual dimension of this journey, does he?
Not at all. He sees the quest for meaning as deeply spiritual, even if it's not framed in traditional religious terms. He talks about encountering the divine, which he describes as the highest good, the source of truth and beauty, the force that pushes us to become more than we are.
So in a way, Maps of Meaning is a guidebook for a spiritual journey.
That's one way to think about it. It challenges us to think deeply about life's meaning, confront the darkness within ourselves and the world, and choose a path towards growth, transformation, and connection with something larger than ourselves.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around,
Yeah.
but definitely a journey worth taking. One of the things that really stuck with me was Peterson's anecdote about the schizophrenic patient who believed the battle between good and evil was happening in his mind.
Oh, yeah. That's a powerful story. He uses it to highlight that the kingdom of heaven, as Christ called it, is both within us and around us. It's often our own fear, hatred, and self-deception that prevent us from seeing the good that already exists.
It's not about escaping to some otherworldly paradise, but transforming our inner landscape.
Right.
And that often starts with encounters with the unknown, experiences that shake us out of complacency and make us reevaluate our priorities.
Exactly. And speaking of encounters with the unknown, remember the story on page 355 about Peterson and the old man with a knife?
Oh, yeah.
It really captures that sense of mystery and ambiguity that he often explores.
We're left wondering, was the old man a threat or just misunderstood? Was that voice warning Peterson accurate or just projecting its own fears? Peterson doesn't give us a clear answer.
He leaves it open to interpretation, and I think that's part of his point. Life is full of ambiguity. We rarely have all the information we need to make perfect decisions.
Right.
We have to learn to navigate the unknown, trust our intuition, and act with courage, even when we're not certain of the outcome.
Sounds like he's encouraging us to embrace the mystery, the uncertainty, the adventure of it all.
Precisely. And that's what makes Maps of Meaning so compelling. It doesn't offer easy answers.
Hmm.
It challenges us to think deeply, question our assumptions, and embark on our own journeys of self-discovery.
A journey that can be both exhilarating and terrifying,
Yeah,
but ultimately it's the path to becoming more fully ourselves, more fully human, more fully alive.
you've captured it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And this journey of self-discovery is ongoing. We never stop learning, growing, and evolving. And the more we understand about ourselves, the more we can contribute to the world around us.
So we're all alchemists in a way,
Hmm.
constantly working to transform ourselves and the world into something more beautiful, more meaningful, more aligned with the good. It's both a heavy responsibility and an incredible opportunity.
Beautifully put. And I think that's a great point to transition to the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Next, we'll explore some practical applications of Peterson's ideas and consider how we can use his insights to navigate the complexities of modern life.
So as we've been exploring maps of meaning, I keep coming back to this question. How do we actually apply these big ideas to our everyday lives? It's fascinating to talk about, myth and archetypes, but what does that actually look like in practice?
It's a great question and one that Peterson addresses directly.
Okay.
He doesn't just leave us with these grand concepts. He offers concrete suggestions for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
So let's get practical.
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, one of Peterson's core messages is the importance of taking responsibility for our lives. It's easy to fall into the trap of blaming external circumstances or other people for our unhappiness.
Right.
But he challenges us to shift that perspective.
It's easier to play the victim than to look in the mirror.
It can be, but even in difficult circumstances, we always have a choice
Okay.
in how we respond, the attitude we adopt, and the actions we take.
It's like we have more agency than we often realize.
Exactly. And one of the most powerful ways to exercise that agency is to set meaningful goals and work towards them. Peterson argues that having a clear sense of purpose gives us direction, motivation, and a way to measure our progress. It's like having a map for our lives. A map of meaning, as he calls it.
And I imagine those maps aren't static.
Right.
They evolve as we grow and learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Peterson encourages us to be open to new experiences, challenge our own beliefs, and constantly refine our understanding of the world and our place in it.
But it's not just about external success, is it?
No,
It's about something deeper.
you're exactly right. It's about becoming better human beings, more honest, courageous, and compassionate. Peterson believes that true fulfillment comes not just from what we achieve, but from who we become along the way.
That makes sense. And that's where the idea of confronting our shadow selves comes in, right?
Yes.
Acknowledging those darker parts of ourselves.
Precisely. Peterson believes that personal growth requires acknowledging our flaws and our capacity for darkness. It's only by facing those shadow elements that we can integrate them and move towards wholeness.
That can be a pretty daunting process. Do you have any advice on how to even begin?
Well, Peterson has a few practical suggestions.
Okay.
One is paying attention to our dreams. He sees dreams as a window into the unconscious,
Okay.
a way to access parts of ourselves we're usually unaware of.
I've tried dream journaling before, and it can be pretty intense.
Yeah.
Have you found it helpful in understanding your own shadow side?
It definitely can be. He also talks about the importance of creative pursuits like writing, painting, or music.
Okay.
These can help us express and explore those deeper aspects of ourselves.
So it's like using art as a form of self-discovery.
Exactly. But for Peterson, this journey isn't solitary. He emphasizes the importance of relationships and community.
Right.
We need to belong to something greater than ourselves, whether it's family, friends, or religious community, or a shared cause.
That reminds me of his point about the tension between individuality and the group.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. He argues that true individuality actually emerges from a deep engagement with the group. It's like the hero who undergoes rigorous training within a community before embarking on their own unique quest.
So it's not about rebelling against all forms of authority or tradition, but finding the right structures and mentors to support our growth.
You've got it. It's about finding the right community that can both support us and challenge us to become our best selves.
And this brings us back to the power of stories and myths.
Right.
They provide guidance and inspiration for navigating life's challenges. It's like they're giving us a roadmap.
Exactly. Peterson argues that we can learn from the wisdom encoded in these ancient stories.
Yeah.
They help us understand those archetypal patterns that show up in our own lives, the hero's journey, the battle between good and evil, the descent into chaos, and the eventual emergence of something new.
Okay, so how do we apply those mythical insights to our modern lives? They can feel so removed from our daily experience.
One way is to see ourselves as the protagonists of our own stories. We all face challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt. But we also have the power to choose our responses, overcome obstacles, and emerge transformed from our experiences.
It's like we're all writing our own maps of meaning.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And those maps aren't just personal, they also have a collective dimension.
Okay.
The choices we make and the actions we take ripple outwards and impact the world around us.
And Peterson is clear that those ripples can be positive.
Yes.
He believes in the power of individual action to create change, even in the face of huge obstacles.
He often cites Solzhenitsyn's quote, "One word of truth outweighs the world."
Wow.
It reminds us that even small acts of courage, honesty, and compassion can make a real difference.
It's like we're all contributing to this ongoing alchemical process of transforming the world one small act at a time.
Beautifully said. That captures the essence of Peterson's message. We're not just passive observers of life, we're active participants. The choices we make shape not only our own destinies, but also the destiny of humanity as a whole.
It's a heavy responsibility, but also incredibly empowering. We have the power to create a better world, starting with ourselves.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a powerful message to leave our listeners with.
It certainly is. This has been a fascinating deep dive into maps of meaning. Thank you for guiding us through this complex and thought-provoking material.
The pleasure was all mine. I always enjoy exploring these ideas with you, and to our listener, I encourage you to continue delving into Peterson's work and see how his insights can illuminate your own life and experiences.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving to become the best version of yourself. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.